Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those who are new, my name is Linda and I'm a product designer from Toronto. For today's video, I'll be doing a walkthrough of a recent design challenge that I did for a company I was interviewing for and ended up getting that job as well. So let's get into it. With every design challenge, you are given a prompt to solve for. For this challenge, this is what I was given. Many people love to start new hobbies but often are unable to sustain them. How might an app help a user to remember to make time for their hobbies? So not only did I count the problem I was solving for, but I wanted to see if I could really understand what they are looking for in this particular challenge. I dissected the scenario. I also took in consideration of the time I had and the deliverables. From what I read in the delivery section, it seemed like they were looking for more of a high-level approach to this problem, focusing more on the design rather than the research, which was my approach to this challenge. Because this was an ambiguous challenge, the very first thing I did was write down every single question I had around this topic. This allowed me to get my thoughts out on paper and narrow down on what to focus on so I could do some research online to validate the problem and be able to rationalize my design decisions. So going into the Figma file here, as you can see, it was very rough and it was all over the place, which is not a bad thing. I didn't want to restrict myself on what I could potentially explore because after all this, it allowed me to narrow down and prioritize on what's most important. So once I did the research, validated my problem, and got a few ideas going, I went straight into wireframing rough sketches to get my ideas out on paper again. So as you can see, I worked in flows to make sure the UX made sense and that I was ultimately solving the problem that was given. And once I was happy with that, I moved straight into hi-fi wireframes and prototyping. And obviously, because this was a design challenge that I had to present to the hiring manager and other designers, I had to put this into a case study format for the interview. So let me go into what I actually presented for the interview. So when I presented this case study, it took around 10 to 15 minutes, which is what you want to stay under. So here it is, Hobby Time, a mobile app that helps users schedule in time for their hobbies through challenges. And I go into a project brief talking about sustaining hobbies and some research around it supporting this topic, and just again reiterating the problem. How might an app help a user to remember to make time for their hobbies? So then I go into the discovery phase of kind of like the research of what I found. And before I did that, I wanted to talk about what exactly a hobby is. And this is because the definition of a hobby can change depending on the person, so I wanted to define it for this challenge. So then I go into kind of the research that I found and why it's so hard to make time for your hobbies. And I did the research on Reddit to see what people were saying because I didn't have time to conduct proper user research. And these are kind of the responses that I found. It's the same questions around finding time for your hobbies, and a lot of them were around like their jobs, just not being able to manage it, and being busy. So with those research findings, I wanted to kind of summarize what people are actually struggling with. And there are three main points that came up. One was that a job takes up a lot of their time. Two, they're tired from work, and the last one was time management. And this is the one I want to focus on for this project. Again, going back to time, I didn't have the time to obviously explore all three, which is why I want to focus on one small pain point. Not small, but pretty big pain point that came up a lot. So then I reiterate what the actual problem is, and that is users are not able to make time for their hobbies because they are not able to manage their time properly. So how might an app help users better manage their time for their hobbies even if they have a job? So this was the problem that I want to focus on specifically for sustaining hobbies. And then I started going into empathizing with the user and really understanding who this user is to give better context or more context for me to help solve this problem for this user. And because there are so many users, with the research I did online, I decided to narrow down to one user to understand the context of who this person is. So I go into the user's characteristics, their pain points, and their needs and wants. So with that information, I started to create kind of a journey map and of what the journey should look like for this user that I've created. And I go from steps 1 to 8 of what she should be doing throughout the day to ultimately be pleased with how easy and quick it was to set up and take action on their hobbies. And that was the goal, and they were able to accomplish it through this journey itself. So then before I started going into, wireframing everything and the actual design, I wanted to define some app requirements that it needed to work and, work in the favor of the user. So number 1 was onboarding, 2 were calendar integrations, and 3rd was push notifications. And then I also set up some assumptions as well, which is very important in like a personal case study like this, or just like a design challenge. You don't want to scope out your work too big, because then it's going to be just too much work and you won't be able to focus on one little thing that you should be focusing on. So these are my assumptions, and 1 was they're specifically looking for an app to help find time for their hobbies. 2 is that they're willing to invest some time into their hobbies. 3rd is that they regularly use Google Calendar for their tasks and events, so for like their reminders and whatnot. And the 4th is that the app will generate all the challenges, so the app will do all that heavy lifting work. So now I have kind of the context of who the user is. I also have those app requirements and assumptions. Now I'm in a position where I've set up kind of what I would want the user to do or should be doing for the problem to be solved. And that's where kind of I went into ideation of what the app flow would look like. So this was shown and created to help articulate how a user would move from start to finish to reach their goals. So as you can see, they'd sign up, they get a personalized onboarding, and then they would get curated challenges, which then obviously they will schedule, get reminders, complete the challenge, and maybe even share with friends and family, and overall see their own progress. So during ideation, I went into sketching, and this was more sketching on paper, pen and pencil, just very easy and quick. And these are the main flows I want to focus on. So 1 was onboarding, 2 was scheduling activity, 3 was completing an activity, and the 4th one was like a nice to have, which is seeing progress and a community. After doing my like lo-fi sketches, I went straight into mid-fi wireframes. As you can see, I went into each flow. So we have onboarding, we have like the schedule challenge, complete challenge, and through each of these flows, I kind of annotate of each screen of like what the user would do and kind of the outcome of that task itself. And then after I go through the mid-fi wireframes and show those different flows, I go into the final design of hobby time. And as you can see, it's the same flows that you saw earlier, but now they have color, right spacing, font, everything else, like the UI design of it. And I also have a prototype that I've attached to the slide here. So I go through onboarding, user would onboard, again, the personalized onboarding, kind of see like what hobby they want to focus on, talk about their current level, how much time do they want to spend, get reminders, yada yada, and then go into the actual app where they can schedule a challenge. So as you can see here, it's curated challenges for this user depending on like what they selected during onboarding, and it's just very quick and easy for them to select depending on the time that they have and go into scheduling this activity. So they can schedule it through like their Google Calendar, which is why the assumptions were that the user uses Google Calendar a lot. This is kind of where it plays. And then they would complete the challenge. If they completed it, they would come back to the app, mark as complete, and it'd be kind of like a positive feedback of doing that activity. And then the nice to have that I added was the progress and community, so they get to see kind of how they've been doing for the week, month, year, or like all time. They can also be included in a community where they have their own friends on here, they share what they've done so far, and it just adds that like gamification to the app itself and make users kind of come back and hold that retention for the app. Overall, I would say the design challenge wasn't too bad. I mean, it helped me get the job, so that's a good sign. It was a little bit ambiguous, but I think that's totally normal for these design challenges, especially when you're interviewing. But I hope this walkthrough was helpful and informative to you guys. And of course, if you guys enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up, comment and subscribe, and hit the notification bell to see when I post next. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!